Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.
Getting ready to step into your career era? Set yourself apart with Adobe Creative Cloud Pro for students. Hone your skills with apps like Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, and more, powered with the latest in creative AI. Students save over 55%, so you can build a portfolio you're proud of. Launch your future with Adobe Creative Cloud Pro for students. Visit adobe.com/students to learn more.
Your burger is served, and this is our finest Pepsi Zero Sugar. Its sweet profile perfectly balances the savory notes of your burger.
That is one perfect combination. Burgers deserve Pepsi.
No, I will not take part in these slurs against the royal family. I'm leaving.
Oh, he mad?
The following podcast contains...
But swearing and using dirty words is not one of my vices. I don't use foul language, and I don't like to hear anyone else use it either.
explicit language.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When you gave up true love because your Nana was going to get mad, what the hell were you thinking, Chuck? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 503, Little Ditty about Chuck and Diane, where we talk about that time in 1981 when America and the world lost his mind over a couple of English people getting married. Stay tuned. The What the Hell Were You Thinking podcast is brought to you by Reality Wedding, because someone needs to help you take it down a notch. It's your big day, the one you've dreamed of your entire life, and while your heart wants solid gold centerpieces on every table, Reality Weddings is here to explain that shit can't happen. For 25 years, fathers of the brides and second husbands alike have brought in Reality Weddings to help brides accept certain realities. Our professional staff is immune to tears, rage, tantrums, and threats because we don't get paid unless we say no. Reality Weddings, rest assured, we're cheaper than anything the bride is thinking of.
In London, a brilliant day, a brilliant pageant. 1 million expressions of affection for a prince and his bride. The royal wedding, with all its humanity, all its trappings, waves of emotion, waves of warmth. Tonight, a picture report.
From CBS News in London, this is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather and Bob Schieffer in our newsroom in New York.
Good evening. With heavy Democratic support, President Reagan won his tax cut fight with the House of Representatives today. Earlier this afternoon, as expected, the Senate also gave its support. We'll have more on that in a moment, but now let's go back to Dan in London.
The Archbishop of Canterbury called the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer today the stuff of fairy tales. And in spite of Scotland Yard's most elaborate security measures ever, there was a once-upon-a-time atmosphere in London as the 32-year-old heir to the British throne married the 20-year-old former kindergarten teacher who was virtually unknown until this year.
I've never been one to be all in on the marriage thing.
Plus, no one will want to marry you.
It's not that I'm against marriage, per se, if that's your thing, but let's not pretend it's some magical romantic fantasy. I've fucked way too many married women to believe in that.
You were an adulterer.
I wasn't the one committed adultery. I wasn't married to anyone. Nor do I particularly enjoy weddings, of course, unless, of course, there is a open bar. But somehow, I keep finding myself at weddings.
The open bar helps.
The first wedding I attended was way back in the day when I was still very young and thought I myself would eventually get married someday.
You'll look back and realize just how naive you were.
It was a small church service. I wore my Air Force uniform, and everyone but the bride was brutally hungover. The next wedding was my best friend's, and this was a big service. I wore a tuxedo. It was the only time in my life I've ever worn a tuxedo, and I gotta be honest, I was
So fuckable.
I wasn't even drunk at it. We did get drunk after the reception when all the wedding party went to a dive bar, and I tried to hook up with the maid of honor. And after this, I decided to get out of the wedding game until my friend asked me to officiate her wedding. Lesbian wedding boat cruise with me performing the ceremony. How could I say no? Then I married 2 other friends in the back patio of a bar. It wasn't a planned thing. We were just all drinking, and they got their marriage license that afternoon, and I told them I'd marry them right then and there, and They said yes.
How romantic.
I don't know how romantic it was, but their parents were pissed, which for me was kind of the best part of it. I was hired to photograph another friend's wedding. That was the first and only time I ever photographed a wedding. It went fine. They loved the photos, but it was very stressful. And finally, I officiated my bestest friend in the whole world's wedding. I mean, they did it right. They had a 3-day bash, ceremony at the beer hall, invited all of our friends. It was amazing, and I don't want to brag.
You kind of do.
But I had that crowd eating out of the palm of my hands with my officiating. There were laughs, there were tears, there were rounds of applause, and then, some people got married. And that was the only heterosexual wedding I've ever officiated. These days, I'm retired from marrying people now, unless, of course, lesbian boat cruise wedding, and I would come out of retirement for that, but I'm guessing my wedding days are finally behind me. My friends who did get married seem like they're going to make it for the long haul. There's no divorces so far, so who knows? Maybe having a fat, drunk atheist at your wedding is the secret to marital happiness. I'm not saying I could have prevented Prince Charles from cheating on his beloved prince's wife, but I'm not saying I couldn't have either. But first...
This shit again.
We should talk about the British royal house. Now, I could go into the historical and political history of the British monarchy, which is both complex and extremely nonsensical, but I'm going to skip right past all that and sum it up thusly. The monarchy technically possesses a broad swath of political power, but doesn't use it, ceding most of it to Parliament, and exists primarily to let British people say, here, we got a king, that's him right over there, and instead focus on the family that currently holds the title, the Windsors.
Let's just skip to the Windsor knot instruction.
Couple of things you should know about the Windsors. First, they may be the rulers of England, but they are not in fact.
Not English, though.
The family's original name was Saxe-Coburg Gotha, a German noble family that Queen Victoria married into, and her second child, Edward Albert.
Are you a big Green Acres fan?
No, that's Eddie Albert.
You are my wife.
Goodbye, City Life.
Green Acres, we are there.
Prince Albert.
He's in a can?
I swear I'm going to stop that now. The guy we're talking about became King Edward VII and retained the family name Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. That was until 1917, when there was a minor issue that made the family change their name. Aside from the whole Germany started a World War thing, the very first bomber aircraft which ever dropped sporadic bombs on London was named the Gotha, so King George V changed the family name to Windsor after one of the family's estates. George V reigned until 1936, when he was succeeded by his son Edward VIII, who was so gauche as to fall madly in love with an American divorcee and renounce his throne for her. And there was also,
Nazi stuff.
And I don't actually believe there was much Nazi stuff, maybe a little Nazi adjacency, but not in any meaningful way. So it would be Edward's brother, old stuttering George, who became King George VI. And he was the father of Elizabeth II, the longest ruling monarch in UK history. And when she finally kicked it, Charles III finally got to plant his ass on the throne. As a family, the Windsors have, of course, presided over the arguable high point in the British history, World War I and II, and from the British perspective, the lowest point of British history.
Prince Andrew, Your Majesty.
Please, Andy was hardly the first, nor will he be the last kid fucker in the royal family. It's a big family and very inbred. Now, in this case, I'm referring to the dismantling of the empire. Queen Victoria passed on to her son the largest empire in human history. At its territorial peak in 1920, the British Empire controlled the total area of 13,700,000 square miles, or more than 26% of the Earth's land, excluding Antarctica, and the population was over 449 million people. The United Kingdom had about 120 colonies throughout its history, all through slavery and colonialism, mind you. And when Charles III took the throne, he ruled over the United Kingdom and titularly the Commonwealth, a mere 15 nations, where his role is entirely ceremonial. He just shows up at a ribbon cutting for New Aldis and Belize. The House of Windsor rules over a shell of an empire, and honestly, Charles III, perfect guy to sit on the throne of a washed-up has-been kingdom, and he only exists to be trotted out on national holidays and give tourists something to ooh and ah over, because Charles was and is as mediocre a king as the United Kingdom is mediocre a kingdom. The Irish are fucking delighted. And a large part of why I say this is all wrapped up in this story, which I'm finally about to begin. Should you be so incredibly fortunate to be the heir apparent to the British throne, you have landed yourself a pretty cherry gig. And while it is traditional for the heirs to serve in the Royal Navy, Army, the Air Force, you can rest assured that you will be granted an officer's commission and you will never be subject to anything remotely resembling actual danger. Your role in the military will be identical to your role in life. Wear the clothes, say the words, knock off early, and swive a chambermaid.
It's nice work when you can get it.
Beyond this, and holding the occasional golden shovel at the groundbreaking of a new child's hospital in Shropshire, you have no responsibilities whatsoever. Well, you do actually have one responsibility. You will need to marry, fuck, and produce at least one potential heir to the throne, preferably an heir and a spare. No matter how far down you personally are in the line of succession, you must bring a viable Windsor child into the world in case they're suddenly needed to take the throne. Nor can you simply marry any old person because, you know, you love them or something.
What's love got to do with it?
Your spouse must be the right kind of person. The British actually had a fucking law on the books. This is a country that didn't even bother to write out a constitution, but they put this on paper about who royals can marry. The Royal Marriages Act of 1772 said that the first 6 people in the line of succession needed the reigning monarch's permission to marry, and the Parliament could veto said marriage even after the marriage had taken place. What was the impetus behind such a law?
Catholicism.
And while the law was repealed, that didn't happen until 2013. It didn't go into effect until 2015, which is why Prince Harry was able to marry who he did when he did, by the by. Now, while religion is the dominant concern, or was the dominant concern, there were other unofficial, if no less binding factors. The prospective spouse must be of good family, meaning pretty much noble family, good reputation, meaning their scandals must be the kind of scandals that could be waved off as, yep, boys will be boys. Women didn't get that privilege. And they must not have been married previously, allowing for the presumption of virginity. I'm not saying the Queen Mother did a hymen check, but I am equally not ruling it out. With all of this still very much in force when it came for Charles Philip Arthur George Windsor, Prince of Edinburgh, heir apparent to the throne of the United Kingdom, Commonwealth nations, to perform his one and only real princely duty, he was faced with something of a conundrum. You see, he was in love with a commoner.
How very gauche, if I may say so.
Oh.
And to make it worse, later on, she would be a divorced commoner.
Unacceptable.
Camilla Shand was born to a retired Royal Army major and businessman. Oh, he's in trade. And they were a decidedly upper middle class family with historical ties to the royal family, but definitely not nobility. The family was respectable enough, and you read that, rich enough to rub shoulders with the nobility, which is how she met a young Charles in 1971 at, predictably enough, a polo match. There were different versions of the first meeting, depending on which gossip columnist you believe. The two dated briefly, but,
allegedly.
Charles's many duties prevented them from doing anything serious. There are different versions of this story as well, a common one being that the family disapproved of the match and that Charles sit overseas as part of his Navy duties to separate the two. Still other gossip columnists say that the Queen Mother had already picked Chuck's bride, and still another said Camilla ended things because Chuck didn't want to get married until he was in his 30s, and she had another beau in the wings, the man who would eventually become her first husband, Andrew Parker Bowles. And no matter what it was made clear to Charles that Camilla and he were not an acceptable match for the heir apparent. Now, I had mentioned that there was a bride in mind, and this is where we meet Lady Diana Frances Spencer, fourth child of the 8th Earl Spencer and the Viscountess Althorpe. Born in 1961 at Sandringham near the royal family's estates. The Spencer family was blue-blooded British nobility, whose auspicious members included Winston Churchill. The family had close ties with the Queen Mother, and the Queen Mother was very much interested in marrying one of the Diana's generation of Spencers into the royal family.
Lucky girl. Yeah.
Diana's childhood was not a particularly happy one. Her parents divorced, and there was a protracted custody battle using the kids as pawns. An evil stepmother, the fairy tale Connect 4, was established in Diana's life fairly early on.
Pretty sneaky, sis.
As a young adult, Di was kind of living a proto-Gen X slacker life. She pursued music and a career in dance. She lived in an apartment with 3 friends, and when she was working with kids, in 1981, she was a kindergarten assistant when her prince showed up. Prince Charles had actually dated Diana's older sister in 1977, which tracks since Chuck was 13 years older than Diana.
You creepy old pedo.
She was 20 years old. I mean, when I was 33, I dated a 21-year-old. There's nothing weird about that.
You massive pedo!
The two reacquainted at a country retreat and reportedly hit it off. It should be mentioned again that the Queen Mother had all but decreed one of the Spencer daughters would marry Charles, and since Sarah didn't work out, Diana it was. After only 3 months of dating, she was brought to meet the Queen, who again knew exactly who Diana was, and in February of 1981, the engagement was set. Chuck presented Di with a ring that, according to biography.com, was, quote, 18-karat white gold ring topped with a 12-karat oval Ceylon sapphire surrounded by 14 solitaire diamonds. It was made by the crown jeweler Garrett and was reportedly inspired by the brooch Prince Albert had created in 1840 as a wedding present for Queen Victoria. The ring reportedly cost Charles £28,000 at the time, or around $35,000, unquote. Yeah, cost Charles my ass, like he mowed lawns to save up for it. That ring cost the British taxpayers that money. The announcement of the royal engagement set off a feeding frenzy in the tabloid sharks of the UK. Diana was an unknown, and they began digging for any speck of information they could find. She originally thought she could maintain some sort of semblance of a normal life, but was soon schooled by the most mercenary media in the world how much that wasn't going to happen. From Neiman Labs, quote, Prince Charles had obviously failed to find a mate to produce an heir in the throne by 1980. So here was Diana, whose photograph in a newspaper instantly sold extra copies. Although Charles himself appeared unsure about her, the media was not. Traditional deference for the monarchy was already fading fast, and non-establishment media moguls such as Rupert Murdoch, not only with the Times, but the huge selling Sun and Sunday News of the world, saw Diana as the Trojan horse for populism inside the heart of the British establishment, unquote. And there wasn't much dirt to dig on Di. She really was just a fairly shy young woman with a rather banal interest. She didn't go out to the club. She hadn't dated widely before Charles, and my research didn't turn up any previous suitors. And while she was attractive, it was in a safe British way. There was nothing about her that could be termed salacious. I mean, the raciest image of Di out there before the wedding was taken after the engagement when a paparazzi shot a photo of her on a playground where you could see the shadow of her legs through a thin fabric of the skirt she was wearing.
Scandalous.
It wouldn't be until after the wedding that Di's problems with the media became an issue for her. She really seemed to be the young naive that the royal family so desperately wanted as the future queen. Charles, on the other hand, not as enthusiastic about Di as the rest of the country was.
And I suppose in love.
Of course.
Whatever in love means.
Oof. Chuck. Fumble, man. That comment came back to haunt them, basically from the time it left Chuck's mouth. But royal weddings, so love ain't got nothing to do with it, because this was a fucking media event. Royal weddings had long been fodder for the media. Queen Elizabeth's wedding in 1947, while the UK was still very much in the deprivation of post-World War II Europe, was a chance for the Brits to celebrate the waning days of their fast-fading empire. In the States, it was a chance both to enjoy the fairy tale aspect and to indulge in some social commentary. From a New Yorker article in 1947, quote, the editors of 4 New York papers had the same idea for a feature story, that there must be humbler couples getting married on the day of Liz and Phil to enjoy the new headline nomenclature. See, it's not just me doing a Chuck and Di. And that a certain volume of human interest, either mildly or strongly diluted with social criticism, according to the paper's position, could be milked out of a contrast between their social circumstances and the Mountbattens. PM ran a story of a photograph of the strip on the wedding of Susie Occhioni, a 28-packer in a garment factory, and Salvatore Arricchio, same age, a box maker. There was no champagne, no 6'3" high wedding cake, PM commented starkly. The Post carried stories about 2 other couples. One in London, the Post New York couple, Henry Price and Corinne Hersher, were depressed. Miss Hersher's parents didn't want them to marry because they were of different religions, a kind of gentleman's agreement, an angle with a twist, as any up-to-the-minute assistant city editor could figure. The Post-British couple couldn't have a church wedding because they didn't have enough clothing coupons between them to get the girl a wedding dress, unquote. But in 1981, there were no such comparisons. The first royal wedding of the modern mass media age was all about spectacle, wealth, and power. The firm's media handler, the firm's being the insider's name for the royal family, understood their mission, and that mission was to make as big a fucking deal about this as possible, and they were very good at their jobs. In the UK, the common rabble was mad for Lady Di. Chuck, they could take her leave, but they loved Diana. American audiences were quick to jump on the fairy tale aspects of the wedding, and it became a national obsession. From history.com, quote, "The wedding was broadcast in 74 countries and watched by 750 million people around the globe. Americans set their alarm clocks early to tune in, and live in the UK, the wedding date, July 29, 1981, was declared a national holiday so more royal subjects could watch. Over 600,000 spectators filled the street of London, hoping to catch a glimpse of the Prince and Princess of Wales. Jeffrey Simpson of the Globe and Mail reported, throughout the service, the royal couple could clearly hear the cheers from the thousands outside. After one such cheer, Lady Diana turned to Prince Charles and smiled from beneath her veil," unquote. The Jacksonville Tribune provides a standard story from the day from a stateside perspective about the wedding. Quote, "The assembled heads of state, crowned heads of Europe, honored guests like First Lady Nancy Reagan, all joined in the singing of hymns, as did the wedding couple. The Queen of Tonga cooled the brow of her husband the king by majestically beating a large rattan fan in time to the music. Outside subway stations near the route were packed. Newspaper boys did a brisk trade. Most of the paper poured out greetings. Diana, this is your day," bannered the conservative Daily Express. Even the staid Financial Times, which normally displays major business news on this first page, carried the wedding as its main story of the day under the headline, "A Right Royal Street Party." The Communist Party's Morning Star devoted a page to the wedding with coverage with a headline reading, "For richer and richer," unquote. CNN said of the phenomena, quote, "In 1981, before cable TV, the wedding of Prince Charles and Diana, Princess of Wales, was one of the most watched television events of the 1980s in the United States. For the first time in front of a mass global television audience was the idea of a fairy tale princess wedding. One who was one of us marrying into the royal family." Diana was not exactly one of us, but we'll go back to CNN. "Everyone could relate to that around the world," unquote. The wedding was one of the cultural touchstone moments that comes to define a generation, more so for Brits than Americans. I know that I was just old enough to be aware of the media hype going on about the wedding and knew just enough history to roll my eyes at it. But there were young women in my 7th grade class that positively swooned. Photos from magazines were poured over. Details were analyzed. The groom ewed at. All 3 networks preempted their daily soap operas to cover the soap opera of the decade. Respected journalists were stationed throughout the streets of London to make appreciative comments as the royal procession went by, while the network's Hollywood reporters droned on about Diana's gown. The big news magazines, Time and Newsweek, ran cover stories leading up to the wedding and multi-page spreads of photos in the following week. People magazine went full-on orgasmic frenzy on the topic. Weeks of coverage culminated in a double issue chock full of all the glitter and gossip. The wedding overshot everything else in the United States news. Important things happened in the days leading up to and after the wedding, like, I don't know, the kidnapping of Adam Walsh that would go on to inspire America's Most Wanted, or fledgling Microsoft acquiring the full rights to DOS, creating MS-DOS, or Reagan announcing the largest tax cut in U.S. history, a coup in Gambia, and the baseball strike. Baseball, it's America's sport. That ended, and no one cared about it. And of course, no one at all thinks about poor Trevor Revell, who died because of the wedding.
Beg pardon?
Oh, yeah. From Wikipedia, quote, "Trevor Revell, a 35-year-old magician and escape artist, was killed while performing at a royal wedding celebration in Portsmouth, England. Revell buckled into a straitjacket and was hoisted 30 feet into the air on a rope, which was then set on fire. Revell escaped from the straitjacket, but the rope burned through before Revell could be lowered, and he fell headfirst onto the concrete. Revell died later at Queen Alexandra Hospital," unquote. I was fascinated by this story, and I went looking for more information. And pod friends, I found it. In the form of a post from a guy named Darren in 2007 on a message board from BTA QOTW.com. I don't know, quote of the week or something. While it doesn't provide a lot of information, I share it for reasons that are about to become abundantly clear. Quote, "I had a big street party with various entertainers doing their bit, and one of the climax acts was a Skypeologist. His finale was to escape from a straitjacket whilst hanging upside down from a burning rope 30 feet above Guildhall Square, Portsmouth. Trevor Ravel was his name, as the father of a girl I went to school with. He was only 35. This being 1981, the crowd control consisted of a length of rope being handed to the people at the front, which included me and my best mate, and police telling everyone to stand behind the rope, which they did. He was strapped into a straitjacket and hoisted 30 feet straight up in the air on a burning rope before a crowd of about 3,000 people celebrating the wedding. But trick failed, rope burnt through too quick, and he plunged headfirst onto a concrete paving slab. I was at the front, saw him hit the ground head first. I heard his skull shatter. I heard his skull crack like a boiled egg being hit with a spoon. I saw the puddle of blood in the brain he left behind after they was still twitching body onto a stretcher and took him in the ambulance to the QA hospital where he lay and died. And I thought at the time, that was about the most horrific thing that I'd ever seen until, the crowd dispersed with a group of rowdy skinheads who had been standing behind us pushed their way forwards and began jumping and dancing in the pools of brain and blood. And I know it's not a funny story, but you gotta admit, the mental image of these pasty white fucking ball fucking British skinheads doing a little jig and shuffle. I know. I'm a sick fuck. I don't know. Maybe it's the fairy tale factor that makes this story so alluring to Americans. I mean, but even when a president's daughter marries while he's in the office, it doesn't remotely compare to the pomp and circumstance of our mother country. And our version of royalty, celebrities' weddings can and do rivet attention, but certainly not wall-to-wall coverage of every aspect of the event from the news media. I mean, the closest I can recall to the kind of mania over the royal wedding of an American couple was Luke and Laura's nuptial of November of 1981. But for months, the country was glued to that relationship and their upcoming nuptial until some 30 million of them watched the ceremony, and Luke and Laura weren't even real fucking people. They were actors on a soap opera called General Hospital. One of these days, I'm going to have to get to that story. But in many ways, Luke and Laura were the Americanization of Charles and Diana, only with love triangles, and there were car crashes, people were in comas. Oh, wow, that was totally prophetic, but I'm getting ahead of myself. As for Chuck and Diane, their fairy tale was also pretty short-lived. Everyone knows how it ended, but for those of us who grew up watching Princess Diana mature, it was indeed quite the transformation. The shy, timid lady Diana Spencer, whose husband was now and always been in love with another woman, carried on an affair with her throughout their entire marriage, grew into a self-assured, capable adult woman who quickly learned how to manage the media to shape her public persona. She fulfilled her matrimonial duties by producing the obligatory heir and spare, and while she loved her children, she turned over those motherly duties to the staff and focused on being the people's princess, for good and for bad. And that is where we will pick up next week for what is an unofficial part 2 to our story that I've chosen to call We'll Always Have Paris.
Really, Dave?
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Got a car to sell but no time to waste? Hop on to Carvana.com to get a real offer for your car in seconds. All you have to do is enter your license plate, answer a few quick questions, and if you accept the offer, Carvana will pay you as soon as you hand the keys over. They even offer same-day pickup in many cities. Save your time, score some cash, and sell your car the convenient way to Carvana. Pickup times vary. Fees may apply.
You don't technically need this car. You say that out loud to yourself. You say, I have no space. You say, I'm just looking. Then you click. Then you zoom in on photo number 87 and whisper, oh no. Then you text a friend, the one who always enables you. You say to yourself, this is the last one, knowing it is not. You don't need this car. But maybe, just maybe, this car needs you. Bring a trailer. It's never just a car.
That is it for the show this week. Wow. This is a harder thing to research than I thought it would be. It was such a huge deal back in the 80s that I just assumed there had to be shit tons of stuff out there about it, but it's so totally overshadowed by their kid's wedding that Chuck and Di's wedding is just kind of drowned out. Now, this is not really a two-parter. because next week we're going to talk about the Chuck and Die that culminated with America losing this fucking melon when she died. So you definitely want to come back for that next week. Speaking of coming back, rate and review us so others can decide if they want to come back for my honestly questionable opinions on guys cracking their heads open and skinheads dancing in pools of blood, which is just funny if you think about it. Why didn't the guy put a mattress down? Why didn't he put a mattress down? Oh, no, we can't put a mattress down. It's the royal wedding. Again, I won't have a mattress for that. No, sorry. I'm still obsessed by Trevor Revell. It's the most delightful story out of all of this, and I will be talking about it for weeks, and people at the bar are going to be really sick and disgusted by it. So if you want to be sick and disgusted, kick us $1 at patreon.com/whatthehellpodcast. We're going to have to use that money to buy Gavin a bottle of gin to drown his sorrows, because I'm making Gavin do all the research about Princess Diana's death, just for my own personal entertainment. Do all the things that Jeremy tells you to do in the closing credits, otherwise, well, he's going to prevent me from marrying the woman of my dreams and force me into a marriage with a loveless marriage with a young British nanny. And so for me, Dave, little ditty about Chuck and Diane, two English kids doing the best they can. Bledsoe, producer.
I refuse to dishonor them in any way whatsoever.
Gavin, and all the fictional little Windsors on this show, we want to say, hold on to the monarchy as long as you can, but it's hard to love a cold-blooded man. Rock on, and we'll see you all next week.
Sucking on chili dog outside the tasty breeze. Diane sitting on Jackie's lap, got his hands between her knees. Jackie say, hey Diane, let's run off behind the shady tree. Jiggle off those Bobby Brooks, let me do what I please. Saying, oh yeah, life goes on.
What the Hell Were You Thinking stars Dave Bledsoe and features Gavin St. James and several fictional minions. The show is produced by Kimberly Steele and a part of the Seltzer Kings podcast network. You can find more information on the show on their website, whatthehellpodcast.com, or on Facebook as What the Hell Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I have no ending for this, so I take a small bow.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.